Hello everybody, it's Tuesday, it's 3 o'clock, that means it's Tech Tuesday. Today I'm going to be talking about the broadband infrastructure bill that just passed. It contains a lot of money, so we'll discuss that here in just a minute. Be right back. Hey again, thanks for joining me. This is Rick Uzzi from Zquorum. So I will be talking today about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, specifically the broadband portion of that. There's $42.5 billion. That's a lot of dollars. That's going to be allocated for broadband. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that are in the act today. And then also, this is very important for our industry. If you're a broadband provider, or if you wind up finding this later or tuning in today and you're a state would be very important in this mix here. So very important. So in addition to today's Tech Tuesday, I'm sure I'll cover this on future Tech Tuesdays, but really pretty much every day I'm going to be doing a live stream at some point during the day. It won't be at 3 o'clock necessarily a specific time, but I'll be doing a live stream every day about this bill and just some news about it, what money that's being allocated. It may be not necessarily about this bill, there are other funds out there. So again, that'll be every day. So if you're not already subscribed to my channel, go ahead and click the subscribe button on YouTube and click the little bell there, and then you'll be notified anytime I'm live or we post a video, so that you can tune in and check that out especially if the broadband infrastructure bill is something that's interesting to you. So be sure to check that out. So let's talk about it. Let's see what's happening here with this. So again, this is called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, you'll see that for short. And then below that is the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment Program. So you'll notice equity is in there and access is in there. The equity part is trying to hopefully make sure that everybody can get access to broadband equally in some fashion. There's provisions in here for affordability, for areas that are difficult to reach, that have been avoided a lot of times by service providers because they're just frankly expensive to provide there. So it's really trying to focus on that. There's quite a few things that are different about it from what we've seen, kind of the broadband programs that we've seen in the past. So let's talk about those things. So let's start out here with what this is. So basically, it's a grant program. It's managed by the NTIA, or the National Telecommunications Information Administration. Those are the folks that are managing it, and it's to be established not later than 100 days after the enactment, which was when it is signed by the president, which was yesterday. So President Biden signed this infrastructure bill yesterday. So it's supposed to be everything kind of get the wheels moving as far as getting implemented no later than 180 days after yesterday. So sometime mid to early May 2022, you'll be seeing basically where things are going to be happening pretty quickly, and probably before that there'll be news. So one of the things that's important to note is that there need to be updated broadband maps in place before any funds can be, at least I think, before any funds can be allocated. And this is because the broadband maps that we have today are just not very good. They were based on the FCC 477 data. It's not reliable. It's, so there's places where you look at it and it's like, oh, there's definitely broadband here, but yet they're saying there isn't, or vice versa. So they want to make sure that this money goes to places that really need it. So that's an important part of this, that these broadband maps have to be updated and in place before these funds, certainly most of these funds, can be allocated. Authorizes appropriations of $42.45 billion. Again, that's a huge amount of money. So think about that, as to the amount that can be done with that. Now, originally they wanted, I think the infrastructure bill, they wanted like $100 billion to go towards this, and that did not happen through various negotiations in Congress, but $42.45 billion is a lot of money. So the eligible entities for this, you'll see if you read the bill, eligible entities quite a bit, and really what they're talking about there are the 50 states, District of Columbia, and the U.S. territories. And by territories, they list specifically the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, American Samoa, Commonwealth of the North Mariana Islands. So those particular places would be what would be called an eligible entity. And then also anchor institutions, I believe, are referred to as eligible entities at times in this as well, and I'll talk about that. So what I wanted to go over some definitions in this act, and one of the things that's mentioned a lot are unserved locations and underserved locations. So what's an unserved location? That's a location that has no access to broadband service or lacks access to reliable broadband service offered with at least 25 by 3 service. So if you've got, let's say, DSL service and you're at 10 megs, you're qualified as not having broadband access. Or maybe the only thing available in your area is a geostationary satellite, and it's 20 megs is the best you're getting, something like that. So that does not qualify. And certainly on the upspeed can be issues there as well. Has to have latency that can support real-time interactive applications. So they want to make sure that, again, let's say take a geostationary satellite that's got this huge latency. That's not going to qualify. And then there's unserved service project. So you've got your unserved location, and then if you've got a project for that location, that project has to have at least 80% of the area served by the project that are unserved locations. So in other words, a large tract of that has to be unserved if that's going to be the project that you're going to do. And then we've got underserved. I underline that because it's a little bit confusing. So underserved location, that's not an unserved location. So in order to be underserved, you're not an unserved location, because that's kind of the next level down or up, I guess. Has to lack access to reliable broadband service offered with at least 100 megs by 20 megs. So instead of the prior 125 by 3, you're considered underserved if you have something less than 100 by 20. So you can see that the numbers are ratcheting up here. And again, the same thing with latency. It's got to support real-time interactive applications. And then the underserved service project is similar. You have to have at least 80% of the area served by the project that are unserved or underserved locations. So you can combine those two, and that could be an underserved service project with at least 80% of unserved and underserved locations. So you see the term reliable broadband service in here. So what do they mean by that? So they're saying broadband service that meets performance criteria for service availability, adaptability, adaptability to changing end user requirements, length of serviceable life, or other criteria, other than upload and download speeds, as determined by the Assistant Secretary in coordination with the Commission. So when you see a term like Assistant Secretary in here, it always is referring to the head of the NTIA. So basically it's talking about the NTIA here. So it's as determined by the NTIA or the head honcho in charge there. And then there's also high cost areas that are defined in here. That's an unserved area. So this is, again, unserved. Think about that definition we just talked about, where the cost of build-outs is higher than other areas per the NTIA based on these particular things. The remoteness of, the remoteness of the location, lack of population density, unique topography in the area. So let's talk about that for a minute. So remoteness of the location. So that's one of the issues that we have, is that reasons that broadband hasn't been deployed in certain places because there's just not that many people there. It's remote, hard to get to. It could be that it's on the top of a mountain. It could be it's just a very rural area where you've got one customer per several miles, kind of remote in that sense. Lack of population density would cover that as well. Not many people living there. Unique topography of the area, that could be the mountain. Could be just hard to get to because of that. Could be hard to lay fiber because you're trying to get it into granite, and you can only go down so far, and it's very expensive to trench that. So high rate of poverty in the area. So it could be very populated, but it could be that the people there just don't have money to be able to get broadband. So they really want to focus on affordability here. So that would be a high cost area where you can try to get broadband to those folks. And then any other factor identified by the Assistant Secretary, which would be, again, the head of the NTIA, in consultation with the Commission, which would be the FCC when they say Commission. And what is a priority broadband project? That's mentioned in there. That would be a project designed to provide broadband service that meets speed, that meets speed, latency, reliability, consistency, and quality of service, and other factors determined by the NTIA. So again, these things all need to come together to make sure this is a priority broadband project: speed, latency, reliability, consistency, and quality of service, those kinds of things. So what they're trying to do here, you see, ensure that the network built by the project can easily scale to speeds over time, to meet evolving connectivity needs of households and businesses, support the deployment of 5G, successor wireless technologies, and other advanced services. So what they're trying to do, they really want to make this future-proof. So fiber is going to be definitely in the mix here because it's a future-proof technology. You lay fiber, and speeds have just, with the same fiber in the ground, speeds have gone up and up and up. We're talking about 25 gigabits per second, 50, 100 gigabits per second on fiber, just that's already existing in the ground, just with different technology. That's important. And it mentions 5G here. So 5G, if you are in an area, you could do 5G and meet a lot of these needs where you've got millimeter wave, where you can do very fast speeds, multi-gigabit speeds with wireless. It does require small cells, which means lots of microcells very close to each other that have line of sight because you're using millimeter wave. So that's going to require fiber, right? So if you've got, or at least maybe cable, but you've got a kind of front haul and then back haul all that stuff. So you've got all these microcells, and then you've got to get those cells connected so that you can get the internet back and forth from those small cells, and then of course back haul that to wherever your point of presence is. So fiber is going to be in the mix, but you've got other technologies here. So again, I think they want to make sure this is future-proof, that whatever project you are going to put in is something that can scale quickly. So don't try putting in something that is going to be locked in, even though they give you speeds of, let's say for unserved would be 25 by 3, underserved 100 by 20. Even though you've got, let's say, a speed of 100 by 20 and you're getting just over that, they're not saying that you would plan for that. They're expecting people to plan for gigabit and higher services. So if you're going to be putting fiber in the ground anyway, that's what you're going to be kind of planning for. Again, the fiber's in the ground, and you can go up to higher speeds as needed with that technology. So let's talk about the funding. There's a minimum initial allocation of $100 million to the 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico. So each state will get $100 million. This is just to start out with. And then you've got $100 million that's going to be divided equally among those U.S. territories that I mentioned. And then there's be an allocation of the remaining amounts. And this would be after the broadband data maps are made public. Now, what's interesting is if you read through the Act, it doesn't mention the broadband data maps when it talks about the minimum initial allocation. So it may be that if the broadband maps take longer than this 180-day period when this funding starts to get looked at, and I'll explain what happens at 180 days, but if those broadband maps take place sooner, it may be possible that the states will be able to get $100 million before those maps are available, that they can make use of those limited funds, the initial allocation, just that paltry $100 million, right, before maybe the broadband maps are out, because it does not mention the broadband maps when it was talking about the minimum initial allocation. Let's talk about, let's see, unserved. Make sure I got everything there. I didn't miss anything, did I? No. Okay. So unserved projects first. This is basically how the prioritization is going to be done. So we talked about what unserved was, those projects, and the 25 by 3 speeds. And you've got underserved projects at the 100 by 20 speeds. Those would be next, and that could include unserved projects as well. Then you've got your community anchor institutions that would be lacking 1 gigabit per second. So a little bit higher bar there for them, but if they're lacking, lower bar actually, so if they're lacking 1 gig, so even if they have 500 megabits per second, if they're lacking 1 gig, then that can be a prioritized project. And that would include schools, libraries, health centers, hospitals, and other health kind of agencies, public safety, public housing organizations that are facilitating greater use of broadband service. So it can include making broadband affordable, promoting broadband, those kinds of things I think will be included in that. And then you've got your priority broadband projects. And it's important to note that they put this in there, I'm sure, because there are states that have provisions or laws that say, or something in the budget that say you cannot, if you're a municipality, you cannot provide broadband service. Some of them say you can't provide it at all. Some will say you can't provide it if there's a competing operator there. So what this is saying, you cannot, if you're going to make use of these funds, you cannot exclude cooperatives. That would be something like maybe an electric cooperative, nonprofits, public-private partnerships, private companies, public or private utilities, public utility districts, or local governments. So you can't exclude anybody that wants to get in the broadband business if there's a need. But again, the funds need to be something that there has to be a need. There needs to be unserved or underserved. So that does take care of some of that, where a municipality might get in the business, but maybe there's already at least one operator there that's providing excellent service at high speeds that's meeting all these requirements. High cost areas, so there will be allocations to high cost areas of 10% or 4.25 billion. Should it be 4.45? Maybe so. Might have put a wrong number in there. That'll be allocated after the new broadband maps are in place. So, okay, you were probably told there would be no math in this presentation, but I will try to help you here. So the way that will work is they're going to divide the number of unserved locations in high-cost areas in the eligible entity by the total number of unserved locations in all high-cost areas in the U.S. So what does that mean? I think I know what that means. I looked through that, and I tried to do the math. So what you do is, once you do that, so you're going to divide that number, then you're going to multiply that by the 4.25 billion that's available, or the 10%. Again, I may be slightly off on that number. So I gave an example here for what I think this means, and this is, I just threw some numbers in here to make it easy. So let's say a state has 5 high-cost locations in the state. So again, high cost would be one of those very remote areas, top of a mountain kind of place. Could be, poverty, an area that's not a lot of income. So that would be a high-cost area. So how's this going to be allocated? Well, let's say a state had 5 high-cost locations, and they're probably going to have quite a few more of those. But again, I'm trying to do this as an example. And the real thing is it's a ratio, right? So, and let's say that the total U.S. has 300 high-cost locations. So then what your formula would look like would be you take the 5 high-cost locations by the 300 total in the U.S. That gives you 0.167. Then you multiply that times the 4.25 billion that's available, and that means that state would get 70,975,000. So again, there's a ratio there based on that and what that state would get. So hopefully that makes sense. There's other expenses that will be allocated, but there are limits on that. So administrative expenses, for example, not more than 5% can be used for planning and pre-deployment activities. So there's going to have to be a lot of that's going to be done up front, this planning and pre-deployment. And that would be, and this is really for, I think, the state and managing the grants and determining who's going to get money. It's not really about planning and pre-deployment of the broadband infrastructure itself. That is part of the other funds. So we're talking about here research and data collection, identifying unserved and underserved locations, development of a budget for the pre-planning activities, publications, outreach, communications, and support. So you're trying to promote this or outreach to other organizations and those kinds of things. Establishing, operating, or increasing the capacity of a broadband office, training for employees, etc. So that broadband office is very important because, again, the eligible entities for this are the states. So this is what's very different about a lot of prior funding things, like RDOF and those kinds of things, where the funds went directly to the service provider that was going to be providing the service. In this case, the funds are going to go to the states. The states hopefully know a little bit better about what the broadband needs are in their area, and then they can dole out the money from there based on what they see as the needs. And the same kinds of organizations can apply for the money. So you could still be a telephone company, you could be a cable company, a municipality, an EMC, whatever. You can be that kind of an organization, and then you would be a sub-grantee under this. So the states will get the grants, and you could be a sub-grantee under that. So these broadband offices are important, because each state, not every state has one. Some have broadband office and agency. They've got other kinds of things in place because they've been trying to deploy broadband in their state. Some are very good at it. Some have not been so good. Some don't have a broadband office or anything in place to handle this. So if you want the money, you really got to get your act together. If you're a state, get your broadband office in place, hire people for that, those kinds of things. So there is, this 5% or whatever, not more than that. You can take that money, use that to establish this broadband office that you can then respond to the proposal to do a grant, those kinds of things. So you got to get your office in place if you don't have one. And then not more than 2% for administration of the grant. I assume that's talking about the ongoing administration of the grant. Not more than 2% can be allocated to that. And then there is a matching funds requirement. Something like RDOF, for example, the way that worked was there was a reverse auction, and then you bid. You basically, in this reverse auction, it was like name that tune in so many notes. You tried to bid the least amount of support that you would take, and then you had to put the rest of the money in, right? So you might say, okay, well, I'm going to only request that I get 25% of the money that I need, and then I'll fund the rest of it. So you're trying to bid to get that money. Well, here, there's a 25% requirement for states or subgrantees to do matching funds. So they can't take 100% of these funds and use it. There's this matching here, but it's pretty interesting the way they're doing it. So it must be contributed from non-federal funds, or it does say from a federal, regional, commission, or authority, but there's other sources of that. I think I got that right. This provision does not include high-cost areas, so if you're talking about a high-cost area, you don't need to worry about matching funds, it sounds like. The state or subgrantee can request a waiver for other reasons, if it's not a high-cost area, but there's other reasons that you think there should be a waiver. The state or the subgrantee may be requesting from the state, and then the state from the federal government could request a waiver. Sources of matching funds can be the state, so the state can match the funds. So if let's say they're going to grant a local municipality $100 million, then they can, maybe it's $75 million that they give them, they can give them the extra 25, so the state can do that. A utility company could pitch that in, a cooperative, a nonprofit, or a for-profit company can provide these matching funds. Maybe they would do that maybe as an investment, let's say. Regional planning or governmental organization, and a federal, regional commission or authority, or any combination of these. So you can get those matching funds from one or multiple places. It just needs to be 25% of the amount that you're getting. And then, interestingly, it does allow, mentions in the Act that it allows for matching funds through the use of programs like CARES and ARPA for matching. So that CARES was the Coronavirus Recovery Act, I think it was. I can't remember what all the letters stand for. But that was passed, and a lot of funds have been brought out through that. And then you've got ARPA, that was the American Recovery Act. So there's money that's already out there for that. So you can actually use those federal dollars as part of the matching funds. So that's pretty interesting that they're going to allow that. And then the matching can also be an in-kind contribution. So things like utility poles, rights of way, conduit maybe, those kinds of things. So a municipality, for example, or utility might have utility poles, electric poles, kinds of things that they can make use of, and that can somehow be calculated in these matching funds. So that's interesting as well. And then states must ensure that broadband service providers can challenge whether locations meet the requirements for funding. So this is just straight out of the bill here. It says, must ensure a transparent, evidence-based, and expeditious challenge process under which a unit of local government, nonprofit organization, or other broadband service provider can challenge a determination made by the eligible entity in the initial proposal as to whether a particular location or community anchor institution within the jurisdiction of the eligible entity is eligible for the grant funds, including whether a particular location is unserved or underserved. So, for example, again, you've got this challenge process, and if you've got an area that actually you're a service provider and you say, wait a minute, this is already served. You're saying it's not served, and these, it is, because we've got service there and it is at least 25 by 3. Maybe you're providing 50 by 10 or something like that. Or maybe you're saying it's not underserved because you're providing 500 by 100, something like that. So you can challenge that. Any of these entities can challenge that. And one of the things that's going to be kind of critical, or a critical piece of that, are broadband maps. Now, the states can use these funds to create their own broadband maps. So if they want to start the process of doing this, then they can create their own broadband maps, and they can kind of find out what's unserved and underserved. They can use some of the data that's out there. The NTIA has a pretty good map that they can look at. I'll post some links. I'll post a link to the Act. I'll post a link to that NTIA site and that their map as well. So that's maybe some data that could be looked at now to determine whether something's served or unserved. And then again, there's another thing that I'm going to post in the comments is there's the FCC Broadband Data Act, which that was passed last year, and then early this year I think in January, the FCC finally did the proposal, the notice of proposed rulemaking on that. So that's when they sent out what the requirements were as far as getting this broadband map in place. So that's going to be a national map that's going to be run, I think, by the FCC probably. That's going to show all of the service areas, what's served, what's unserved, different speeds, maybe pricing. That's going to have a challenge process in it itself. So in that broadband map, there's supposed to be the ability for a consumer, for example, if they look on the map and they look at the area and they say, wait a minute, this says I'm able to get 100 by 20 and I can't find that anywhere. So they can submit something that says, I challenge this, I'm not able to get this. A service provider can submit a challenge that says, I'm seeing that this service does not exist here, but yet I am providing it, so they can challenge it. So that's going to be part of this national broadband map, and I'm sure that will factor into this challenge process here as well. How are things going to start happening here? So the first thing is, again, 180 days basically from yesterday, sometime mid-May is when this first notice of funding opportunity is supposed to go out from the NTIA. And that's supposed to provide details on the program, the amounts, requirements, allowed uses of the grant money. So a lot of that in the Act now is kind of specified, but this is going to be probably a Reader's Digest version of everything that is applicable to these states that are going to be submitting for these funds, this money. It's going to invite these eligible entities, and again, anytime you see that, that would be referring to mostly a state or a territory. It's going to invite them to submit letters of intent to participate and receive funding. So that might be the first step, is they send out this NoFO, and then the states can send a letter as quickly as possible and say, yeah, we definitely want to participate in this. That's kind of like what happened with RDOF, where they said, we're going to make this money available, let us know if you want to participate. And then the harder steps come after that. There'll be an online application that'll be available to submit the initial proposal and the final proposal for grants. So again, there may be different steps there on the initial proposal and the final proposal. As they get further along in the proposal process, they ask for more and more information. With RDOF, it was like, we want to see your financial statements, for the last 5 years. It was kind of the last things that they were doing, and you got to show us your detailed technical plans. Well, here it's probably going to be, well, I'll show you exactly what it's going to be here in a minute. There's going to be some things that the states are going to have to provide as part of this application. And then there'll be the notice of available amounts. Once the broadband maps again are in place, this will happen. That'll be the estimated amount available to the state. The invitation to submit a formal proposal for a grant. So this, I think, would be kind of this will be after the letter of intent, I believe, this formal proposal. Outline long-term objectives and steps to close the digital divide, enhance economic growth and job creation. Coordination with local, regional governments and plans. List existing efforts funded by the federal government. So the states are going to have to provide all of this information. And then a plan to competitively award subgrants to ensure timely deployment of broadband to each unserved and underserved location in each anchor institution. So you've got to get a little bit more detailed here. And then there's this 5-year action plan. So they've got to be looking 5 years out. So it says a state that receives funds must submit a 5-year action plan to NTIA. I underlined receives because that's the way it says it in the bill. But I think this all takes place before the funds are received. I don't think the state receives the funds and then must submit the 5-year action plan. I'm assuming the 5-year action plan has to take place before they get the funds. I don't know that for sure, but it reads this way in the bill. That's why I underlined it. And that in that action plan must be informed by collaboration with local and regional entities. So they've got to show that they've collaborated locally and regionally with other stakeholders. Must detail investment priorities and costs, and that would be alignment of the planned spending, economic development, telehealth, and related connectivity efforts. So all of that's straight from the bill. And the likely requirements in this will be, they'll have to propose solutions for the deployment of affordable broadband service in the area, include localized data, identifying locations that should be prioritized for federal support. So again, that's another reason that they may want to get their maps or their mapping in place beforehand if they can, to be able to get a jump start on that. And it does prior to this, it mentions affordable. Again, that's going to be important, that this be an affordable service. So, you take in everything into account, the funds that they're going to be able to get, how they make that affordable, what they can do to get service to areas that are high cost areas. Because once the fiber's laid, that does help a lot. Once you get, that's sometimes the highest cost, is getting that initial infrastructure in place. So once that's done, then maybe maintaining that over time is a little bit easier. But then again, you've got areas that are low income, which may be a challenge. So you may need to do some subsidies there to make sure that you can get enough subscribers there on board. So there's a lot that's going to go into this. Ascertain how best to serve unserved locations. For example, the establishment of co-ops or public-private partnerships. So that would be public-private partnerships. We're seeing that here in Georgia. They're doing a lot of that. Windstream's doing some of that, where Windstream, a local telephone company, will partner with an electric membership co-op, and together they will be providing broadband to a wide swath of area that didn't have good broadband before. And that makes a lot of sense, because a lot of times an EMC, for example, might cover several counties. And so it's not just covering, for example, a municipality or a town where it's a little bit easier to provide broadband, but they're providing, they're providing electric to, again, these areas that have maybe one customer per several miles. So if you're partnering, Windstream, for example, and the local EMC here in Georgia might partner and then be able to provide access throughout that EMC's territory. Wherever they're providing electric, they can provide broadband. And that even would be to a customer if they're the only customer within several miles of anybody else. So that's what these public-private partnerships can do. Identify technical assistance needed to carry out the plan. And it does talk a lot about technical support, that the NTIA can provide technical support as part of this. So there'll probably be more technical information. I'm sure there'll be help on how to submit grants, how to fill out the forms, that kind of information. Says how long it would take to build out universal broadband in the state, and that is something that is the goal of this. I mean, the whole goal of this program is to have universal broadband everywhere in the country. That would include urban areas, rural areas, low-income areas, wherever they happen to be, whether that's urban or rural areas, everywhere in the state, including these hard-to-reach areas, geographically, topographically, that kind of thing. So there you have it. That's pretty much what's happening with this. So again, I will be doing these every day. Not at 3 o'clock, so it won't be a Tech Tuesday, but I'll be doing this broadband deployment news kind of stream, I think, pretty much every day as I read through stories, see what's happening. I'm going to take a few minutes just to talk about that. So again, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. On YouTube, go ahead and click the bell, the notification bell when you subscribe, and then you'll be notified anytime I'm live. So if this is a topic that's important to you, make sure you do that. Also, remember Zecorum, if you're not in the business yet and you're looking at getting in the business, we've been helping operators or service providers get into the broadband business, or really get into the internet business before broadband. So we started out helping people get into the dial-up business. So this was back in like 94, 95. And we've obviously progressed into broadband since then. So we can provide services like provisioning of CPE, email hosting, diagnostics for broadband for both DOCSIS and fiber, technical support. So we have a help desk where people will call and get help with their broadband service. So we provide an outsourced help desk, and we provide, if you need help with feasibility studies, with engineering, design, construction of your broadband network, give us a call or send us an email. We'll be happy to talk to you about that. So thanks for watching today. I will be back next Tuesday at 3 o'clock with a Tech Tuesday, and I will be back at some point tomorrow with just some of the latest news on this broadband infrastructure plan and broadband deployment news. So hope to see you either tomorrow or sometime in the future. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.